Already this hour, we've shown you where we are on the impeachment inquiry and where we believe we're headed. Then we spoke with the former federal prosecutor about all the legal challenges the president now facing, and of course, including impeachment. In this segment, a professor who has accurately predicted every presidential election since 1984, he joins us to talk about this president. He says impeachment is going to happen. Joining us now, Alan Lichtman, political historian, a professor at American University. He's also the author of The Case for Impeachment. Okay, Smarty Pants, you got all these elections right here. I thought you were crazy when I spoke to you before the election in 2016, and I ate crow on that one. Now, to be clear, you're not necessarily saying the president will be removed, but you believe he will be impeached, or do you think it's the full Monty that there'll be enough votes in the Senate to move him at this point?
It is absolutely inevitable that he is going to be impeached. Number one, cautious leaders like Nancy Pelosi would not have pushed it this far just to say, oops, sorry, nothing to see here, no impeachment. Impeachment is going to happen. And there is one and only one scenario in which the president gets removed. One of the Lichtman rules of politics is that for incumbent office holders like Republican senators, their top priority, maybe their only priority, is survival. And if they believe Trump is going to bring them down, they could well turn against him. They have no personal relationship with him. Some inside sources say if they could vote in secret, they'd bounce him out because they would much prefer to see not the loose cannon Donald Trump, but the reliable, down-the-pipe, Christian conservative Mike Pence as president.
Look from the historical perspective, and I've spoken to some of the former prosecutors who were involved in Watergate. They say from the significance of the charges and the allegations of wrongdoing, this much worse than even Watergate. That said, though, are there any tells that tell you, for example, both the president going after members of his administration, cabinet members' own staff, Pence going mum. You also saw Pompeo looking the other way when they went after their own folks. But my point is, with so many shady characters and having such only transactional surface relationships and loyalty being non-existent, if at all, do you see anything that you learned from the last lesson that people will start turning sooner than later?
Yes. First of all, it took a very long time to bring Nixon down, about a year and a half between the beginnings of the Senate investigations that were televised and finally the House Judiciary Committee voting 3 articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. We're only in the second week of public hearings. But this is very different. There has already been a blockbuster poll showing that 51% of the American people want to see not only Donald Trump impeached, but Donald Trump removed. 70% of the American people, whether they favor impeachment removal or not, think he did something wrong in the Ukraine scandal. Only 21% think that he didn't. That also blows a hole in this idea that Trump has unshakable support from 35 to 40% of the American people.
Alan, I've got up on the screen your 13 keys, and you have remained steadfast. You look at these 13 indicators and only these 13 indicators, and historically, you've been proven right here. You pick where the American public's going to fall depending on these. One of these you already have said has turned, and that's the scandal key. But my question is, have the last 3 years of this president and the defining deviancy down, what we've gotten used to as the American public, that it takes so much to shock us anymore that somehow he's going to be graded on a curve when it comes to the ultimate punishment for a president, and that's forcible removal from office? Did your keys almost have to adjust for what we've lived through the last 36 months?
Every 4 years for more than 30 years, people have been telling me, oh, there's something different about this election, so your keys won't hold. In 2008, they said, oh, they won't hold because there's an African-American running. Or in 2016, they say they won't hold because a woman is running. But the keys are a robust system. They were developed in 1981, going all the way back to the horse and buggy days of 1860, and they've been correct prospectively since 1984. So I do not adjust my keys for the vagaries of what goes on in an individual election.
I'm curious, and I speak for myself on this one, but I'm exhausted by this. And granted, I do this every single day, but there is a fatigue in this country, and I believe a crave for some sense of normalcy from the majority, and I think an overwhelming majority of the American public. How do you at all quantify that? Assuming I'm right for the moment, that people are tired of the 5 p.m. food fight about some norms that have gone out the window, and they want to go back to something that at least feels familiar. You measure, for example, short-term economy, long-term economy. You also have charisma indicators for both the challenger and the incumbent. Two people can look at Trump and view him as either charismatic or whatever the opposite of charismatic is. Is it, in this particular case, so uniquely in the eye of the beholder that it's hard to have an impartial metric? Because, again, I've never lived in a window of time where two people can look at the same set of facts and come to two completely different conclusions.
We do have an objective measure, and that, of course, is the opinion polls. And they demonstrate that while Trump is a great showman, that his appeal is to a very narrow slice of the electorate. And you don't have to look at the opinion polls. You can look at the results of the elections in Virginia, where the Democrats took everything. In Kentucky, a state Trump won by 30 points. A Democrat took over the governorship, and the same thing in Louisiana. A Democrat held the governorship in a state that Trump won by 20 points. And so that's why I do not give Trump the charisma key. It's nothing to do with my personal views. It has to do with the fact that based on the definition of the keys, a charismatic candidate has to be broadly appealing across the electorate, not just to an intense base.
You know, you and I spoke about 6 months ago, and you were pushing then, especially when we were talking about your book, that either go big or go home was basically the message for the Democrats, and to grow a spine and go after it. Well, obviously Pelosi did just do that. She reiterated today that this thing's got to come to a head before the election for all the reasons we already know. You believe that even if he's not convicted in the Senate, that the Democrats still will get a net gain out of this because there is a stigma attached to impeachment, even if it doesn't lead to removal, and no matter what, the president will be harmed next November?
Absolutely. If you look at history, every president who was impeached, or Nixon who resigned to avoid impeachment, their party lost the next election. A trial will be immensely damaging to the president. Remember, the Democrats can appoint prosecutors who can call witnesses, present documents, present opening and closing statements, and cross-examine any witnesses for the president. And the president would have to present real arguments, not Rudy Giuliani-type spin. And we've already seen in these impeachment hearings how strong the case is and how bereft the Republicans are on any substantive arguments as opposed to distraction and deflection, which won't work in a trial.
Well, again, folks, Professor Lichtman, 9-0. So when we get closer to the election and he gives us his pick, I will be making a road trip out to Vegas. I'll be taking all bets here, and we'll work the lines with the wise guys. Professor Lichtman, again, thank you so much. And again, a reminder for everybody, the book, The Case for Impeachment, I've gone through. It's a good read here, and I appreciate the time as always. Thank you.
Anytime. I hope you make a lot of money.
Hey, you and me both. All right, everybody. When we come back, Barack Obama did something he usually avoids doing. I'm talking about weighing in on the presidential race, specifically the Democratic field. We'll show you what he said, then we'll bring in our political panel.